Through the years, with Mission Impossible, the movie franchise has given us hard-boiled action, stunts, and unreal missions since 1996, and it has been a tense ride right up until this point. Sadly, now this new movie is not as spectacular. It is, of course, still entertaining in some parts, but it lacks the spark provided by some of the other movies. So today I will sit down to tell you what I think of this movie. I do not deem to be a spectacular ending to the franchise. First and foremost, the movie has a quite slow start, and the first hour of the movie is quite boring, apart perhaps from when Ethan Hunt jokes that he will take a poison pill to die, but then tricks Gabriel so that he and Grace is able to escape. The first hour has a lot of dialogue, and it is of course about Ethan Hunt finding Gabriel, and long, tired, drawn out dialogues from this entity inbound to take over the world's nuclear weapons. It picks up after that, but by and large, the movie could have had a way better start. There are furthermore a lot of flashbacks from other movies that tells me that we have a thin story. When lines get repeated time and time again, we live and die in the shadows for the people we care about and for the people we never meet. Something along the lines of that. That particular line is repeated constantly throughout the movie, and you see lots of flashbacks from the previous movie and from some of the other movies, rather than trying to create something new. Of course, it might have a deeper meaning that everything about Ethan Hunt's life is connected, that he is the chosen one, but this package of things seems kind of random, and there's no coherence or good explanation of how it is all connected. Now we come to the important part. Why this movie is not as good as Fallout, for example. The previous movie, or goes practical, when Tom Cruise is climbing the Burj Khalifa in one of his wildest stunts ever. This time, it is just not as spectacular. Yes, it is kinda incredible when Tom Cruise is hanging on these old-style planes, and when he is basically doing this suicide mission on a water barely getting up alive after that, but still, it is not as cool and extreme as the other stunts he has done. Of course, it is still sick that he does that as a 60-year-old man, but at the same time, we lack a spectacular approach from the other movies. Furthermore, we come to another point that is just not a problem in this movie, but also in a lot of new movies. You have these inclusion characters in the cast, with a lot of women in the important roles, on the diving team, in the commando team, and also the president is of course black to be politically correct, because basically the left is running things in Hollywood these days. So yes, it may not necessarily ruin the movie, and this is something I may poke the beer at for no reason, but I feel it makes it potentially unrealistic that in a crisis situation, these are the people that is going to defend the American people in the midst of a crisis. But enough about that. One character that I feel was very interesting to watch during the second part of the movie is the one played by Tremble Tillman that plays a submarine captain in the movie. It does a good performance there, but sounding like the president played by the non-inspiring Angela Bassett. That's supposed to be the Kamala Harris that never was elected. He is not given a fair portion of the screen time. During the time he is there, however, he shows himself as the second best actor in this movie, right behind Tom Cruise. The movie itself is a lot less tense and exciting than some of the other movies, and you are not exactly on the edge of your seat like you had been in Fallout, for example. The intensity rating is probably at a 5 out of 10 towards the end, and the movie progresses at a dragged rate, where you feel they easily could have scraped off at least half an hour to make a more tense movie. That does not slow down that much. So while the plane scene would mimic the train scene a bit in the previous movie, the train scene is still tenser and more exciting. A further comment I have to give on this movie is how you see this more deep sinister movie like you did in the previous one, where it is all about the sum of your choices, deep thinking, and such as that, which is not really what we think of in a Mission Impossible movie. We want more edge of your seat, mindless action, running against the clock to do these impossible missions. Of course, Ethan Hunt always finds a way, but up until now, it is the least tense ending we have seen. And maybe it is just a franchise that has run out a bit dry. A plus point is always that we have a lot of action, and those that like action movies will find it entertaining, but at the same time, the action scenes are not as tense as you prefer. You have seen way better action scenes in some of the other movies, and you are rarely on the edge of your seat. But I guess that just follows in the footsteps of new high-budget action movies these days. They struggled to make it as tense as before because they instead doubled down on the deeper meaning and want people to get more invested in the character Ethan Hunt rather than the action scenes to perhaps give him a well-deserved send-off, which is perfectly fine but not necessarily entertaining. In addition, it should be said that Gabriel and his entity are far from as good villains as Solomon Lane or Hendrix from the Ghost Protocol movie. Such an event that an AI system gone rogue takes over everything, including the world's nuclear arsenals, ready to attack, is an interesting play, but I still do not believe it to be well done in any way. There's some explanation in the beginning, but the clear targets and the goals of this entity is barely explained in a satisfying way. Even Tenet is better explained in this movie, and that kinda says it all. At the end here, we need to talk about Ethan Hunt's crew in the movie, which naturally is not as good as his previous crew. With this French girl now as a substitute for Vanessa Kirby, that was not that bad in the previous movie. We have also got Grace, played by Haley Atwell, as sorta the new mainstay on the team right now. In addition, you sorely miss Ilsa Faust, which perhaps was the best female character in the franchise, played by Rebecca Ferguson. Of course, it seems like every movie now someone has to die. Last time it was her, and now it was Luther in turn, since his original team with Luther Benji and Rebecca Ferguson will always make those new guys hang out to dry. It is of course difficult to feel for the new crew in the same way. This new black guy Degas is also a new addition, but sadly it does not even reach Luther to the knees in quality. Naturally, you knew all along that Luther was going to die, and it was an emotional send-off. Nevertheless, when the crew is not as good, the entertainment levels goes a bit bust. And while I'm not massively disappointed with this movie, I still believe it is not a worthy send-off for the franchise, which of course it might not be the end, but at least it seems to be. Then this movie should have been a lot tenser and more edge of your seat style, like many of the other movies are. But for me, it's a 7 out of 10, and probably one of the weakest movies in the whole movie series, guys.